everybody, and welcome to Inside Quest. We're the international bank and trust for your mind. Our goal is to bring on amazing people who can help you raise the mental seed capital you need to start up your dreams. And if you're looking for high-impact intellectual lending, there's no better guest than the woman joining us today. She is a new breed of entrepreneur, an investor focused on financial inclusion and the sharing economy. An out-and-out superhero in the battle to end poverty and social injustice, she does more than just talk about change. She brings it to life. Her successes as an entrepreneur put her in a rare class of people who see the most pressing problems we face as a society and dive headfirst into creating a solution. Operating from a wellspring of compassion so deep and forceful it gives me the chills, this mother of three has redefined for me and countless others what it means to be an entrepreneur. Her contributions to the world's most radically underfunded entrepreneurs make apparent that, as she says, success is not about what you have, but instead what you are determined to do. Please help me in welcoming a wildly passionate woman who proves beyond all reason that unimaginable wealth comes in many non-financial forms. The Stanford-educated investor and advisor to the Collaborative Fund, the co-founder and CEO of ProFounder, Disney Imagineering's first entrepreneur in resident, author of Clay, Water, Brick, the most powerfully human book on business I have ever read, and the co-founder of the world's first P2P micro-lending website, Kiva, the incomparable Jessica Jackley. Yeah. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today.
That was so nice.
It is so true. And so here's the secret to Inside Quest.
Okay.
Is that I bring on guests that, as I research them, I learn something that's really interesting to me, something that I want to be researching whether they're going to come on the show or not. So I cannot, unfortunately, remember the person who first put your name on my radar, but our producer, Anthony, who you met earlier, said, hey.
Might have been Rain. I don't know.
Maybe it was.
I think.
You are almost certainly correct. Rainn Wilson, you were the man. Thank you so much, everybody at Soul Pancake. As always, I owe you guys yet another debt of gratitude. So when Anthony brought you up, I was like, oh my God, that's the microfinancing woman. I have got to learn more about that. I'm absolutely intrigued. But what I didn't know, because I hadn't read your book yet, what I didn't know was how intrinsic it is to you as a person. And I've seen virtually every talk that you've given that's available online.
Sorry.
No, I love it. And the thing is, over and over and over, you see truly that wellspring of compassion that really did give me the chills. That's not just rhetoric. That's really how I felt watching your stuff. And I was like, whoa. Somebody who, because I think, and this is actually what I hope you'll lead us in with, I had a very business-oriented internal definition of what an entrepreneur is, and abstracting it from the world of business was always a little awkward for me. But you really show how it can apply to virtually every aspect of life, being a parent, a business owner, or somebody who literally reaches into the earth to shape clay from what they find. How did you come to such a unique definition of entrepreneurship?
Well, first, thanks for having me here. This
Totally
is fun.
A pleasure.
I think it sometimes takes a while for us to understand in our own journeys what is unique and what's not, what's more common. And for my own, in my own experiences, I sort of came to understanding myself as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, a little bit retroactively. And I guess, you know, I wouldn't have known necessarily even just a few years ago that my definition or the definitions that I'm more drawn to about entrepreneurship are unique or that different than a lot of other folks. The way I like to look at the world, I mean, I believe that everybody has great potential. And I think there's opportunity to not just reach our own potential, but to do great things in the world, to add value, to create value for other people in a lot of untapped places, almost everywhere we look. And so the book, you mentioned this just now, so I'll reiterate. The title, Clay, Water, Brick, is inspired by the story of an entrepreneur that I met about 10 years ago named Patrick in Uganda, who, like you said, literally starts his own entrepreneurial journey by digging into the ground beneath his bare feet, digging until he finds deposits of clay, mixing that clay with water, forming bricks with his own two hands, and then selling those bricks for fractions of a penny each. But the fact that he began with so little, I think makes the idea of living entrepreneurially, working entrepreneurially, and being an entrepreneur an accessible one, because you can start with even very little and take that to great places.
You've talked a lot about his story and some of the talks you've given. And guys, please go look it up. You just have to drop her name into YouTube. It'll come up. She's done 2 TED Talks. One of them opens with that story and goes into a little more detail about the tragedy leading up to that and why he flees and all that. But what I really want to talk about, one, if you can, give us that definition that you use for entrepreneurship, which I think is so powerful and I think will really impact these guys. It literally shook me when I read it. I was like, I've been thinking about, not that it's anathema to what I believed at all. It just so concisely summed up the spirit of being an entrepreneur. It'd be awesome if you could share that.
The definition that that I talk about in the book and that I do like to cite and I like to bring up as the one that gets at the core for me is a definition by Howard Stevenson, a Harvard Business School professor. Stevenson says that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. So, I mean, forgive me if I swoon a little bit, but I think that is one romantic definition, right? The pursuit of opportunity without regard to the resources that you currently control. To me, what that focuses on is this pursuit, not possessions, not what we have. It's about moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other, finding that next step to keep going towards this vision that you have for the future and pursuing this opportunity to make the world better, to make something of value, regardless of what you have, what you don't have. And I like to take that definition a little bit further and say, not just regardless of resources, but regardless of failures in the past, regardless of what you think you might still not have that you should go achieve or become before you can pursue that dream. I mean, I think at any stage of our lives, there is always going to be a long list of things that we are not, things that we do not have. Either we don't have the right education, or we have, or we don't have enough education, or we have the wrong kind of experience, or not enough experience, or sometimes, and this is real, too much experience in one thing because then we can't think in a fresh way about it. We're too young, we're too old. Look, there's always going to be a list. So regardless of all that stuff, you move forward. That is the entrepreneurial spirit to me. That's what I love about that definition and that I've seen in entrepreneurs all around the world.
I read an article about you. It was so awesome. I highlighted the hell out of it.
You totally have done your homework. This is really fun. Thank you.
Because doing my homework on you is making me a better person. And that is
very nice.
That is the most truthful compliment that I can pay you. And hopefully it means what it's intended to mean.
Thank you.
But in the article, the person asked you, what advice would you give to a beginning entrepreneur? And I could almost hear you shouting your answer, and you said, start.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's it. Like, you just need to start. And your own life, you talk about how you felt that you didn't have enough education. You're looking at these Stanford business grads, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, if only I knew what they knew, then I could do something special.
I had started off in my first job out of college was at Stanford Business School, and we can go into detail on that one too, but I was a little bit worried for my soul because I'm like, oh, business school, like business is bad, nonprofits are good, but I needed to pay my rent. So I took this job, and yes, at that moment I was like a temp admin, and I looked at these Stanford MBAs and thought, I'm not them. And there are always things you can do around that. But yeah, the advice I would give, and I continue to give, whether it's day 1 or day 100 or 1,000, whatever, in an entrepreneurial journey is it's about getting up every day and starting and continuing to restart and refine. And when you fall down, get back up. And it sounds so cliche, but that's what it is. It's all you can do. It's all you can do.
It is in danger of becoming cliche, and one of the biggest frustrations in my life is truly powerful information gets repeated and getting codified and made packageable so that it can be transmitted to others, and being repeated, it loses the power and people hear the words and not the intent. And that scares me because, so one thing I want to go back to, just because I want to make sure these guys heard you, like the definition of being an entrepreneur about pursuing opportunity without regard for the resources that you currently control. Like, that's so powerful. If that doesn't give you the chills, if it doesn't freak you out a little bit, if it's not going to keep you awake tonight, you're not understanding. Like, you're getting trapped in the actual words and not hearing the definition, right? Because all the excuses that you're telling yourself, and you talk a lot about self-narrative, which I think is so powerful, but the self-narrative that you guys have for yourselves has to do with what you know, don't know too much, too young, too old, whatever the case may be, and so you don't ultimately start. So take us back to Patrick now. What is that moment? What was it about him? He puts his hand into the dirt, which he himself, I'm sure, had done 1,000 times before, with no spark, no epiphany.
Yeah.
And 1,000 other people had done it 1,000 other times with no spark, no epiphany. What happened in that moment that clearly changed his life?
When I met him, it was a few years after he had begun this journey that became a successful brick-making business. I think when you have need, you're driven to figure it out. You're in survival mode, and you're just trying to do what you need to do to get through the day. And I've been so fortunate. And I'm going to guess that a lot of folks in this room have been fortunate, at least during seasons of our lives, where we're not driven in that same way by this abject need to figure it out. Patrick had no choice. He had to decide what he was going to do that particular day to feed himself and his brother. And I think for him, it seemed to me that he was just at a moment where he maybe hadn't tried that particular thing before, and he realized it was a new path, a sort of rejuvenated moment for him where he tried a new way of surviving. This might be a little bit of a tangent on what you've brought up, but I will say I've gotten to, experience and certainly hear from in the periphery some criticism around the idea that so many people that, for example, Kiva serves are entrepreneurs, or that everybody can be an entrepreneur. Look, I've heard this criticism too. I don't think micro-lending is the end-all, be-all silver bullet for poverty alleviation. I don't think everybody at every season of their lives should go be an entrepreneur. But the spirit of living and working entrepreneurially, looking for opportunity and choosing ourselves, deciding to act ourselves and create value as best we can, those two sort of principles, I think you can always apply, you can always use wherever you are in your life, regardless of what you have or don't have at that moment or who you see yourself to be. Right. You also brought up narrative, so I'm going to turn it around and talk to you. So I think that's incredibly important as well. You're the one that's in charge of your own story. So you can look at your life and you can dwell on the details that are points of suffering or challenge. You can dwell on those moments, you can focus on those and tell yourself a story that sort of jumps from sad spot to sad spot. Or you can reframe it and you can focus on what's gone right. You can focus on the strengths that you do have, the opportunities that do exist. And I think doing that can be, you can take the same path, the same experiences, the same set of opportunities and gifts, objectively speaking, and have two very different perspectives, very different outcomes, and sort of sets of, I keep saying opportunities, but yeah, sets of opportunities about what to do next. So I'm really glad that you honed in on that point. One of the magical things I think about Kiva, so just if it's new for anyone here and you haven't heard of that, so 10 years ago, I was the co-founder of this organization, Kiva, person-to-person micro-lending site. What that really means in plain English is there's a website, anybody can go to it, browse profiles of entrepreneurs in need of a small loan, usually just a few $100s, and then you can lend, with PayPal or your credit card online, lend $25 or more toward that entrepreneur's loan need, and over time you get repaid. Repayment rates are around 99%, and the organization just crossed $750 million in these little $25 bits. It's crazy. It's awesome. All over the world. So anyway, one of the great things that I think Kiva did is to tell this new story of poverty and potential, tell this new story of entrepreneurship. The idea that the poor, that I had only heard stories about growing up, I had only heard stories about these individuals, the poor, around need and suffering and sadness and desperation. And the stories that I heard often were followed by some opportunity for me, the potential donor, to contribute by throwing my change in the jar and moving on, or donating, right? But doing something to kind of throw some money at the problem, even if it was very little, and then go on with my life. I think what Kiva, one of the great things it's allowed people to do is to hear a new story, not just about suffering and sadness, but about opportunity and potential and empowerment. And then not just to respond with this donation and then go off with the rest of your life, but to participate in a sustained way as a partner, to participate in this new story as an equal, not donor beneficiary, which there's always some weirdness that can exist when you have that kind of relationship, but an actual equal, somebody who lends money, gets repaid, you're even, it's great. You have a little bit more of a dignified interaction, I think, through this different story. So hopefully that creates a new story for people to participate too, not just as a donor, which is not a bad thing, but as a lender, as a business partner, as somebody who has heard something, is feeling differently about that person, not just pity, not just maybe shame and guilt about your own relative wealth, but can participate in a way that's cheering them on as an entrepreneur. I think it's a really different thing. So there, I just answered like
In fact, we're
I
done,
like 10
guys.
questions,
Thank you so much for coming.
so thanks a lot. Yeah. It's a long answer.
But an amazing one, and you bring up some new things that I think these guys will love. So you and I both grew up on Sally Struthers, painting that picture of
Amen,
sadness.
brother. Yeah. Well, now it's, God bless her too, Christina Aguilera, I hear. I haven't seen it, but apparently like that's the new school infomercial.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
But it's describe, go.
Yeah.
You were going to describe it, right?
I was going to read a quote of yours because yes,
Oh.
I mean, so you just see abject poverty and it looks very sad and very depressing. And so it's trying to get me in an emotional place where I want to give to make my own suffering go away. And you've talked really wonderfully about that it, unfortunately, because of the human psyche, it becomes this transactional moment where I'm trying to alleviate my own pain, right?
Yeah.
There's no ongoing involvement. I'm giving so that I can essentially forget about it, right?
Yeah.
So that I can see that and not feel like I haven't acted.
Check it off. Like it's very
Well said.
transactional instead of
Yes.
relational. It's very it's discreet and achievable, which is great and sucks people in. But there's this weird mixed message about, look, often in my experience, I'll hear a super sad story or some overwhelming, like heartbreaking statistic. If you actually like hear the statistics and take them in and let them penetrate your soul, it's very sad. So you hear this terrible statistic, but then, and you're told that the problems out there in the world are so big, but then don't worry, all we need is like this painless change from your pocket or the couch cushions, and then you can go on with your life and don't worry about it. It's this very dissonant, strange thing. It's almost as if we don't really believe people will rise to the occasion. They don't really want or can accept a grander call to action. It's like this very strange thing. I also talk about in the book this campaign that I remember from years ago. It's from an organization, and it really tapped into this bizarre relationship that's formed between donor and nonprofit and beneficiary somewhere out there in the world. But it basically said, it was this invitation to donate, and it said, give today and we promise we'll never bother you again.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait a minute, what? Like, do you need me or not? And if you do, I mean, are you telling me that on one hand it's this big honor and this wonderful opportunity to, like, again, rise to the occasion, to be important in someone else's life, but at the same time we know we're really being annoying and like you don't really want to hear from us anymore, so we'll buy you out. It was just so strange.
What's interesting, so I've read about that study in an economics book, and they talk about, I mean, so look, hey, they're just trying to figure out psychological principles,
Kinda
fair
worked.
enough, right? But it worked, and that's
Creepy.
It's distressing.
It is
It's
distressing.
really distressing, but it honestly, it only becomes distressing when you realize that there is an alternative story, right? Which brings me to that quote. So this is from you.
I'm already very excited about it.
Yeah, right? Drum roll, please. So you went to East Africa, you spent a lot of time there, and you said, these were not weak, helpless people. They were people who were capable, tenacious, and resourceful. They were people I wanted to be around, not people I wanted to avoid. And then one of the biggest pieces of advice that you give to people, if you want to help somebody, go be with them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't try to lob money from here to East Africa and hope that everything works out well. Like, you need to go there. It needs to be people that you know and understand.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really powerful, that if what you're really trying to do is connect, and, you know, I mean, obviously that goes out to you, to anybody that wants to donate or loan or whatever the case may be to really help, is, for me at least, and this is just me, this is just the way my mind works, to be connected to their humanity, to see in them a person of capability, to see that same entrepreneurial spirit that I see in somebody that comes to work here that has such a similar background to mine, but to be able to see that, and you talk about, oh, I'm gonna remember her name, she was the banana woman.
Oh, that's okay. Constance with bananas, that's all right.
Constance the banana farmer. You said you looked in her eyes and you saw a level of confidence, even a little bit of arrogance, and you loved it, I think was
awesome.
the exact quote.
Right.
What was it about that connection that resonated?
I would meet a lot of women who were not confident, who didn't make eye contact. They sort of hung their heads a little bit and would speak very quietly, wouldn't necessarily even shake my hand. So to meet somebody that was just, hey, I'm here, I'm loud, I'm in charge, was very refreshing, and I was very drawn to that. And I genuinely believe that part of why she was like that was this experience she had, being given this chance to receive a little bit of capital and to do something that she could have ownership over, and that she could contribute in a different way to her life, to her family, to lifting other people around her up. Her story, the banana person, taught me about this sense of mission. She had decided that she wanted to sell bananas, and like everyone wanted to sell bananas, but she had decided that was going to be her thing. She sort of fought for that role and kind of got some agreement with her neighbors to have them let her do that, and they could specialize in other things. And so she told me that she was like, I am the bananas. And there's part of it was, you know, a little bit lost in translation, a little bit broken English kind of thing. But the way she said, I am the bananas, it was her identity. She had such a clear sense of who she was and who she wasn't, what she wanted to go do in the world. And I loved that. And it was it's very motivating for me to think back to her story and think about the success that she had because she was so focused and committed to that.
That's a great story. And you have another story. It's two stories, but you compare them, and you compare them so powerfully. And that is the Patrick, so the brickmaker, and Fatuma. Yeah, and you said what makes some people dig while other people bury.
Yeah.
What?
Well, I should say the Fatuma story then,
yeah,
right?
Please.
While almost all of the entrepreneur stories that I tell are motivating, and I pull some lesson out of them, Fatuma's was a little bit of a sobering warning for me that I put at the end of the book, because when I met her, and I met her 700-800 miles-ish due south of where I'd met Patrick 10 years ago. So she lived in Tanzania, Patrick was in Uganda, Kenya-Uganda border. Fatuma, and by the way, I was meeting all these entrepreneurs, interviewing them, trying to understand how $100 that they had received from a nonprofit I was working with, not Kiva, another one before that, called Village Enterprise, great group. I was interviewing them to see had they gotten the money, how did it impact their lives, just to kind of check in and do a standard of living and impact survey. Anyway, I meet Fatuma, she pulls me into her home, and she's super proud of her business, shows me everything that she's done, shows me her records that she kept in this little blue book. And according to her records, she was just like making money hand over fist and was, relatively speaking, and was doing really well. But she lived in a very meager way. She had this mud home, mud floors, very little that I could see in her one room, home. And she had tattered clothes, her shoes were falling off her feet. She was gaunt. She just didn't look well. And so I asked her more about her business. And finally, I said, okay, Fatuma, it seems like you're doing really well. Where are the profits from your business? What, are you reinvesting them? Like, if so, in what? It was a charcoal business. And she said, she looked at me and she said, okay, well, my profits. And then she tiptoed over to the other side of her very small hut and pounded the floor and next to the mattress where she slept, and she said, my profits are in the World Bank, ha ha ha, and started to crack up. She had literally buried money in the dirt floor, and that's where her profits were, and she called it the World Bank, which was kind of awesome. I thought it was because you're doing like poverty impact surveys. You don't get to joke around all the time about stuff, so it was nice comic relief. But she buried this amazing resource that she had.
It's crazy.
And at some point sort of called it quits, I think, in her mind and in her heart, and said, okay, it's been enough. I don't want to keep growing. I don't want to keep pushing. I was psyched that she seemed relatively okay, but she didn't strike me as somebody that was so content and zen about everything that she had just decided enough was enough. You could tell that there was part of her that was operating out of fear, or that had decided, as we talked about at the beginning, that maybe she didn't have enough. She didn't have what it really took to keep going. She was afraid. I like to contrast those two stories, Patrick's and Fatuma's, because yes, Patrick dug and out of almost nothing, created something really amazing, created a business. And Fatuma was doing well in her business, but then buried her treasures. And so I've asked the question since that moment, gosh, what does make some people dig and some people bury? Why these opposite attitudes? And I think it has to do with entrepreneurship, this definition we've talked about, knowing that you can keep moving forward even if, fill in the blank. But I also think it has to do in this very fundamental way about hope and about being able to have a vision for the future and to believe in that vision, to have a strong enough sort of faith muscle or imagination muscle or belief muscle, whatever that is, that you can imagine this new future and believe so much that it's possible that you keep going, even when it's hard, even if, right?
You talk a lot about finding your voice, and you say that that's something that's really important to you, and that I think you use that as a recalibration method, where it's like you'll frequently sort of ask yourself, so did I. It really resonated with me, you know, that you have to not get lost in the stuff that you're learning. You've got to figure out, okay, which of this is meaningful to me? I won't say useful, because I'm sure a lot of it would be useful, but
we can go useful, yeah.
What's meaningful?
Yeah.
Where's my voice? What's my unique contribution to this problem, this business, this whatever?
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do people find that voice?
Yeah.
And you've talked about sort of groping in the dark for passion and shaping it, and it was actually one of the most eloquent and visceral talks about how somebody can discover and shape their passion at the same time, all in the dark. Because here's the thing, the number one question I get asked,
Yeah.
and you have to understand, I see a lot of people, I interview tons and tons of people, not in
Yeah.
this setting, like job interviews.
Yeah.
Thousands. And I've had kids, like just one was here yesterday, somebody who watched the show and he said, look, I will be your driver for free. I just want to be able to ask you questions. So that's the setup, right?
That's pretty awesome.
He wants to be an entrepreneur. He sees an angle. It's a pretty clever angle. I'll admit, Brandon, I was impressed. And so he pings me and says, I want to come in and spend 5 minutes with you. Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic, come on in. And the question that I always get asked is, how do I find my passion? Now, for me, that's such a foreign concept. Like, since I was a little kid, I knew exactly what that was. So for me, I have stumbled and fumbled for the hows and, of what that looks like, and just felt like your example of it's okay to not know what it is.
Yeah.
But you got to stick your hands in that black box. You got to start shaping it and figuring it out and playing and trying something, knowing that you may change your mind, and that's okay. And I just thought that was incredibly powerful. So now let's bring it to your kids. How are you going to help them find their voice?
I sort of feel like it's inexcusable to not have a working definition. You have to pick something. It's really very much, I think, about choosing and naming it and deciding. Your passion can be out of a place of just total interest and you're just intrigued by something. There are no wrong answers for it, right? So maybe it's that. Maybe it's that something makes you really angry in the world, and so good, go after that. Wherever you find these like emotional spikes, I think that's one way to kind of, pay attention to those and follow those through and make up little homework assignments for yourself. Like, if you think it might be this, even if your emotional sort of spikes are just really small, just go with whatever you got and choose it and say that that's your thing until it's not your thing. Like, pick something, have a working definition, and be passionate about it. You don't lose any time. You make progress if you commit in that moment to kind of being bold about it. Think about the thing that makes you feel the most of anything. Anger, excitement, love, curiosity, and kind of run after that.
Is it bad that my favorite part of that was that they should, I forget the exact word
No,
you
it's
used,
just
but
fun.
essentially you should feel bad about not having, it's inexcusable? I think that was the exact
I really
word?
don't do a lot of shoulds, but I'll do a should. Yeah, I think you should always have some. Come on, like, pick something.
I am
pick
totally
something,
with you.
Right?
Totally
Even if you're
with
just
you.
like, I only think I'm like 1% sure that this is my thing, great. Be 1% sure and pick it and say something. Don't leave it blank. Don't say, I don't know what I like. You gotta like something.
Yeah.
Also, I'll hear people say things like, oh, I really want to be an entrepreneur too. And I'm like, great. My first question is usually like, who do you want to serve? I think there's a case
Rad
to be made
question.
for starting with who,
Super
right?
rad,
You can.
yeah.
My friend Simon Sinek to start with why. You want to start with how,
Dude.
right? There's who. There's
Yes.
And so often I'll ask something like that, or I'll say like, what field are you interested in, or what industry, or what kind of improvements you want to make in the world, or what's the problem you want to address? Something, right? And they'll say, I don't know, I just really want to be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, okay, so you're sort of telling me, like, it's the equivalent, I think, of saying, you want to go win a gold medal in the Olympics, but you haven't chosen your sport.
Right.
And like, you can't do, what are you talking about? So look, I'm all for let's have entrepreneurially, super long word, be a thing. Let's live entrepreneurially, work entrepreneurially. Cool. It's a great kind of how that you can have throughout your whole life. But if you say, I want to go be an entrepreneur, first figure out what problem you want to solve. First figure out what people you want to serve. First figure that part out. And then yes, address whatever it is you want to address in an entrepreneurial way. I think that's how you should order things.
And the reason I ask, because the problem I'm trying to solve in my own life is that I get these people coming to me, and so I make a base assumption, and my base assumption is very similar to something you started with, which is all people are capable, if they meet minimum requirements, right? There is just a certain point where you could be below sort of an IQ level that's going to allow you to perform at basic levels. But let's just assume for a second that you meet what I call minimum requirements.
Okay.
So you meet minimum requirements. After that, it's the entrepreneurial spirit sort of as you define it.
And I would say there are a lot of ways you can do all sorts of work in an entrepreneurial way. I believe my mom is a very entrepreneurial school teacher. I believe my brother is a very entrepreneurial pastor. I believe my husband, who's amazing and is like worth another hour of conversation also, but he's entrepreneurial in everything he does. He's a writer, and he happens to tell stories in like 20 different ways and all these different mediums. So I think you can do whatever you're doing in an entrepreneurial way. I think the goal, if I were you, and this is how I talk to people about it, I think the goal is to figure out what are they, yes, passionate about, but like where are they just excited about creating value, creating something meaningful, special, good that other people want and need. Where do they want to do that? In what way? And then do it as entrepreneurial as possible. But I think the world would be a better place if people thought very carefully, thought long and hard about, if I want to create this kind of value, does it need to be through a brand new venture? Does it need to be in this particular way? Do I need to be the boss and the person in charge? So I would ask people that. I would help them dig into like exactly what they want to do, get to the specifics. And then if it requires a new venture, cool. You have advice on that, I'm sure, right? And if it doesn't, then there are a lot of ways just to think about framing how you want to do good work in the world.
I really love that. I really, really love that.
Yay.
The reason that that resonates with me is it's so true with what I know about the human experience, right? So not everybody wants to do, they don't want necessarily to run the organization. Sometimes even if they think that's the path that they want, and certainly if they're unclear about what it is that they're chasing, there may be something else in their life that they do love, they can bring value, which is why when I first read your what for me was a real redefinition of what it meant to be an entrepreneur, it was just so much more inclusive, and it really covered a lot more aspects, ways to live, people that I know and love and really respect, certainly their contributions to my life. Not entrepreneurial in the traditional sense, but wildly entrepreneurial when you take in your definition. There's another quote, if I may be so indulgent, from you.
Please.
That I think is pretty powerful along those lines. You said, I became convinced that great entrepreneurs have this in common. They simply make a series of choices day after day to move forward regardless of what they lack or must fight against. And when you said that, I don't know why that particular one, to me, sounded so appropriate for a parent, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many things that you're going to have to fight through to get your kids in school to, you know, God forbid, but something happens and they're dealing with an injury or an illness or whatever. But there's a relentlessness to parents that I think that really sums up. And it really, obviously in conjunction with what you'd said earlier, just gave me a much more expansive view. Tying it all back to that self-narrative, you talk a lot about people get stuck, right? People get stuck and they forget that they can envision a future that is different than what they have today and then work towards that future. And I thought, wow, when you apply that beyond a business, when you apply that beyond building an organization, whether not-for-profit or profit, it's really irrelevant. When you just apply that to your life and the things that you want to do, whether you really do want to learn an Olympic event and get a gold medal, like what is that going to take? Or you want to just be the
Pick your
best
sport,
parent.
please. Yes.
Right? It just, I don't know, it brought things together in such a beautiful way of just opening up all these different avenues that people could go down. And the reason that I for so long gravitated towards business and the reason that being an entrepreneur was an awakening for me was it allowed me to play the game really intensely. And that resonated with me. And so hearing your definition and your sense of narrative and all that is like this big puzzle piece clicking together in a way that people can play whatever role they play really intensely. And that doesn't mean with ferocity, but just like totally engaged, totally present, totally there in the moment. And one thing that I know you like to talk about, you talk really wonderfully about how you dealt with the transition from being in the trenches, as you called it, to being a mom. We have a lot of parents.
Oh, I'm still in the trenches.
Right.
Make no mistake. It's just trenches with little people hanging on to me.
Walk them through that, because it's really powerful.
Oh, you mean sort of the transition from pro-founder into other things. So
you said like I felt a little guilty. I was no longer out there fighting for these people in poverty, trying to help them, and here I was.
Yeah, I mean, look, I very quickly, I looked around over the last 4 years, and there are 3 tiny people that I'm responsible for, along with my wonderful husband. I am so fully present in this season, and I'm not apologetic about my choice to be available and present for my kids during this very precious flash, quick season when they're tiny and I can carry them all. And it was a transition to realize that if I wanted to be the kind of parent that I want to be, that requires a lot of time and energy and presence there too. But I still know that I know who I am. I still have an identity that's strong in this area of my life because I have this overarching thing, and I can kind of see the ebbs and flows and embrace them and be cool with them as they come and go and have confidence along the way that I'm still who I am. I still believe what I believe. I still value and prioritize in my work certain things. It just is manifesting in different ways along the ride. So, like, for a while, I focused on this summer. I did a 6-week book tour with all 3 children and my husband and my mom. It was awesome. And we schlepped around the country, all of us, for a few weeks and focused on book. Did that mean I wasn't an entrepreneur because I was being an author promoting a book for 6 weeks? No. It was part of the message, part of the stuff I believe. Started conversations like this. It was great.
Right.
So I don't know if that answers it, but I guess I found that to be just the most wonderful recalibrating, as we talked about before, thing to remember about work. Because jobs come and go, opportunities come and go, teams come and go, over the long haul. And so to know that I have sort of this broader mission helps me ride those waves and kind of be okay with all the seasons.
Yeah, you talk about seasons a lot. It's pretty interesting. Phil Jackson has a quote about that, and he says, "Things come together, things fall apart." So you want to take advantage of that movement while it's happening, and it's very, very similar to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And definitely answers the question. If I may, and if this gets too personal, obviously stop me. But my wife and I think a lot about our marriage and literally apply the same principles that I apply to the business, to our marriage, and we really work at that, and not in like, oh my God, it's a slog, but like it's beautiful to see, like, can we get better at this? Can we get more efficient, increase the communication, elevate the levels of joy, whatever the case may be? And when I was reading, I came across a yearly thing that you and your husband do. Of course, I have a quote.
Yes.
If I may.
Okay.
It's not one resolution. We map out all the areas of our lives, individually, together, family, professional, everything, and talk about our hopes and dreams. That's so smart. So, if you don't mind, I think that's such a profoundly
I'm just
powerful.
Because I'm so lucky. I love him. I love our life.
It's incredible, but I'm going to take away the word luck. Walk us through. How did you come up with that? How does it work?
Yeah.
How can people apply it to their own lives?
So we every year if we can do a full week, it's usually like 5 to 6 days because it's hard to be away from little people. We miss them. We take a period of time and have our the 2 of us sort of retreat and talk about the next year. Look, we talk about life, we talk about all the areas, how it's balanced, how we're doing, and we also sort of talk about we're a team. Our goal, one of many goals in loving each other and supporting each other, is to really figure out how we can we're doing everything together. We do life together. I mean, we did a book tour as a family for 6 weeks. That tells you something, right? We often travel together. We share calendars, that sort of thing. But more importantly, we have goals that we share as a family and as in our careers. And we help balance each other out.
You've been a real person today. I can't tell you how many times here and just interviewing people for jobs, my goal is to find that real person and to see if we can connect. And you really are super you. And that comes across, I mean, obviously for somebody who talks about finding your voice, like you're able to talk in that voice.
Thank you.
Which is incredible. It's truly an honor. And the way that you were able to share and talk about your husband, for me as somebody who's just a huge fan of love, and I don't mind that that's cheesy.
I have a really high cheese tolerance. This is
so
great.
You and I would do just
Let's
fine.
do this.
Truly a gift. I feel very lucky and blessed to have had you on today.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really wonderful. Guys, I'm telling you, you're doing something right in business when you get a chance to go in on something that you care about, that you would love to be doing, even if it had nothing to do with your job. This is one of those moments. There have been a few times in my life where business has really given me something that I wanted and valued, and was just grateful for being in the position that I'm in. Today is one of those days. It was really an honor to connect with her. Do yourself a favor, look her up on YouTube. There's a lot of video out there. She's got some amazing talks. You guys will really, really enjoy it. Where else can they find you on social?
Twitter's great, and you can look at the book too. I mean, that is a very efficient way to learn and be able to re-reference stuff that we've talked about and that I believe is pretty important. So
Perfect. You guys will love the book. Be sure to read it. It's absolutely amazing. If you haven't discovered, we also do this as a podcast, so you can find this on iTunes, and you can watch it as you drive. If you're listen to it as you drive, don't watch while you drive.
Don't watch while you drive.
Yeah, that would be bad
I do not support that.
If you haven't already figured it out, you can do 2x, 3x, depending on if you're on YouTube or iTunes. To me, that changed my life, so I keep saying it in all these shows. And if you want to be a part of our audience, we would love to have you. So for free tickets to IQ Tapings, go to our website, InsideQuest.com, and click on the Get Tickets page, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, subscribe, and we will see you next week. Be legendary, my friends. Take care.
Coming up next, Inside Questions.
You mentioned the importance of starting, restarting, or just starting in general, whether it's day 1, 100, or 1,000. What habits and narratives did you have for yourself on day 1 versus 1,000 for both of you guys?
Starting off to understand a problem, and you can tell I'm a fan of this, with in-context observation. Going and getting close to the people you want to serve and observing them and understanding them. Don't just read a bunch of survey data, but go talk to one person and then another person and understand them deeply. So there's that component. There's also this component of rapid prototyping. Figure out quickly what you can build that might help, see what sticks, figure out what didn't work, and then iterate.